The time is just gone 8:23 a.m. As we kick off this morning on News and Views, looking at the threat and closure of places of worship by South African Police Services in terms of the Disaster Management Act. And we're joined by attorney at law, Yousha Tayob, this morning. Yousha, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome. Yousha, assalamu alaikum. Well, we're still trying to get in touch with Yousha Tayob, and we've seen this in the last few weeks or so, where we've seen this wrongful interpretation of the current lockdown regulations in terms of the Disaster Management Act. We've seen South African Police Services raiding many mosques around the country, and we've even heard of certain arrests being made. Yousha, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Welcome, salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Inayat.
Welcome, and jazakallah to you for joining us this morning, Yousha. Now, Yousha, we've seen the number of actions being taken by the South African Police Services, particularly in the last few days. We've seen what has happened in Ermelo. We've heard about Durban yesterday as well. We've seen a few arrests being made as well. And this entire saga that is unfolding with regard to closure of mosques and places of worship as a result of wrongful interpretation of the law.
Yes, absolutely. You know, there's ambiguity, and it seems to be a deliberate ambiguity, but we can't seem to understand the reason why. So if one has regard to the previous regulations, they defined what a religious gathering was. And the current regulations have veered completely away from that, talking about faith-based gatherings, which are completely undefined. And unfortunately, in our conversations with members of the SAPS at a senior level, you know, they also agreed that the legislation is ambiguous. And the action to be taken at a place of worship is left to the discretion of a police officer, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, at a senior level, obviously, Yousha, there is some sort of understanding as to what these regulations actually mean. But it does appear that we have a problem because this message is not loud and clear, and it has not filtered down to the level, particularly when we're looking at, the local police station, for instance. And that is the reason why we are seeing a number of these incidents taking place where mosques are closed and some people are even being arrested.
Well, you know, we've written a letter to the National Commissioner requesting clarity in order to be able to use that response with the various station commanders of police who attend at masjids. And we haven't had a written response. And this is the difficult part, is that, had we had a response to our letter, which we sent to them as early as the 28th of December last year, we could have used such a letter, but they seem to be thriving on the ambiguity, so I just don't understand why we haven't even had a response from the National Commissioner. And to the extent that we've addressed the NDPP, the National Directorate, they've refused to meet with us, even though we made a request to them that there could be prosecutions that result from these various actions. And there's a potential for civil actions for damages arising out of unlawful arrest and or possibly malicious prosecutions. They've refused to meet with us in this time, and they're referring us to COCTA. COCTA very rarely even acknowledge correspondence. So, you know, we're banging against a brick wall, and the difficulty is wanting to take the matter to court. When we have been able to amicably resolve. So there have been certain police stations where we've engaged the police. We've, they've closed the masjid and subsequently reopened the masjid. And we've also now seen a letter from the provincial commissioner in KZN confirming our view that masjids ought to be allowed to operate provided protocols are in place.
Yes. Now, Yousha, you mentioned obviously a lack of response on the part of COCTA, and also I've seen the correspondence that has gone through, and with various departments obviously have been copied on the correspondence. We've seen correspondence going through to the Minister of Justice as well, and have we even had any acknowledgement at all?
Absolutely none. Absolutely none. In this time of grave uncertainty, we don't even get responses. Absolutely. I mean, so irresponsible, really.
Now, Yousha, let's just talk about one or two of the issues, particularly in terms of the, misinterpretation of the legislation, because there are two issues here. We're talking of Disaster Management Act regulations, and we're talking about the constitution of the country. And let's just talk a bit about this misinterpretations and try and, provide some clarity from a legal perspective.
Yeah, so look, I mean, so the Constitution guarantees freedom of religion, as we know. I mean, it's an entrenched provision. But if we have closer regard to the regulations that were promulgated, particularly Regulation 36.3b, which was issued on the 11th of January 21. Places of worship are not closed. They mention a number of institutions, swimming pools, bars, shebeens, and places of worship and mosques are not in that category. The other categories that remain open, in which, I mean, people can come to their own conclusions, but even with measures in place, um, cinemas, theaters, casinos, museums, galleries, libraries, game parks, botanical gardens, gyms, fitness centers, restaurants, dining and entertaining facilities all remain open, where there's substantially more room for the spread of the virus than there is in a masjid. Uh, Considering that the measures we put into place and the hygiene we practice upon. So that's the one issue, is that it just doesn't make sense that a place of worship is closed when places such as I have mentioned remain open. If you then look particularly at the regulations that were issued in April 2020, they talk about expressly Regulation 36 there also permits gatherings to take place, and is defined in Regulation 1 of the April 20 regulations as any assembly, concourse, or procession, or in any building, place, or premises used for religious purposes. So those have not been retracted. Those regulations are still in place. And if you look at the current 36.3b, with no prohibition on masjids remaining open, it clearly supports the view that masjids remain open and are not to be shut down, with Sharia compliant protocols being taken. I mean, we don't have issues wearing masks, standing apart, entering the masjid, sanitizing. The issue of standing shoulder to shoulder may be contentious, but that's not the issue for discussion today. So if we then also go back and look at what they've done in the April 2020 regulations, they talked about religious gatherings, and they specifically defined what a religious gathering was. Now, post 28 December, they're talking about faith-based gatherings. It just doesn't make sense why you want to change the wording, or without any breaching any confidentiality provisions. When the president referred to having consulted with religious organizations, these religious organizations sought clarity and were not given the clarity by government. So I just don't understand what the agenda is here, by creating ambiguity. I mean, we're all trying to act responsibly in these times, and the head of it all is just not it's not playing fair. Doesn't make sense. I mean, religious. If you were going to close us down, then say to us you're going to close us down for this period. Don't play with words. And like I say, talking to senior SAPS officials in the legal division of SAPS, confirming the ambiguity, and then further saying we leave it to the discretion of police officers who attended the scene. It's ridiculous. I mean, there's just no national directive here.
Exactly. Now, Yousha, just for mosques and jamaats that are affected by this, and we've just heard about Durban now. In fact, I think it was yesterday, and we are going to have this as an ongoing problem. How do we react as committees, as jamaats, and just as communities who frequent these masajids?
Yeah, so look, I don't. KZN, the provincial commissioner in KZN has issued a letter confirming that masjids in KZN remain open. I can't see why that shouldn't be adopted nationally so that places remain open. We need to practice the social distancing in entering the masjid. We need to wear the masks. We need to do the taste testing or fever testing or whatever it is that they're doing these days. And to the extent that the police arrive and say to you, this is an illegal gathering, engage with them on a basis. And I mean, like I said to you, we have engaged with certain station commanders who've closed the masjid. Within a week, we've engaged with them. And have the and they've had the sense to reopen the masjid, and the trustees have put measures in place to ensure that the protocols are observed to the extent that they're Sharia compliant. They have the duty to ask you to disperse if they say it constitutes an illegal gathering. We are then the musallis are then required to disperse. Those who don't disperse are going to be arrested for some or other offense, which is not even defined in the current regulation. So we don't even know what you're going to be charged with. In fact, almost 10 odd days ago, arising out of the Hurst Hill Masjid, because the particular individual did not want to spend time in detention in this difficult time, the admission of guilt fine was paid of 3,000 rand, and we're challenging that. We're awaiting a meeting with the prosecutor from Newlands to challenge the basis on which that admission of guilt fine was paid. What have we paid a fine for? Can you direct us to an offence that we paid a fine for? So that will be taken up with the prosecutor, and I have no doubt that that admission of guilt fine is going to be set aside because there's no breach of any regulation, and the regulations themselves don't create an offence that is punishable in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act. So it's just an absolute quagmire of uncertainty, of ambiguity. But once that admission of guilt fine is set aside and the prosecutor agrees with us that there is no offense, then my intention is to circulate that decision and say, you cannot, any arrest you've effected is clear from the Newlands prosecutor, is clear from the provincial commissioner of KZN that masjids remain open, provide social protocols are in place. And then we're going to start suing, as has already started in certain places in Boksburg and Benoni. We're going to start suing the state for civil claims for unlawful arrest, and an already sorry financial situation is just going to get worse. So you can be rest assured that for any action that have been taken against musallis, we will be instituting civil claims. But I mean, to the extent that they allege it to be an illegal gathering, all we're asking people to do is keep a proper record of who came, get the identity of the police officer, name, contact number, whatever you can get, and record exactly what happened in shutting you down. And insofar as shutting down is concerned, and insofar as arrests are concerned, there's every intention to sue the state.
Well, Yousha, Jazakallah for that and for your time with us this morning. We do appreciate it, and Allah keep you safe. Allah reward your efforts. And I know it's tremendous efforts on the part of yourself and the legal fraternity to make life easier as far as these regulations go, and more importantly, for the benefit of the communities. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khairan. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yousha Tayob joining us this morning, talking about the misinterpretation of disaster management services.